So on the last couple of videos, I've been getting a lot of comments claiming that my points regarding 343 and their handling of the franchise are outdated, or even irrelevant, ever since the significant change in management at the end of 2022. They say that with the likes of Pierre Hintze in charge, things are almost certain to change for the better. They say we won't see a repeat of what happened during the last decade plus of 343's time with Halo. This is why they're wrong. First things first, if you do end up enjoying this video or agree with anything I say here, leave a like on it and it helps me out a lot. I know the 343 Defense Force is going to hit this one especially hard. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. So the elephant in the room. Ever since the firing of the big three, Frank O'Connor, Kiki Wolfkill, and Bonnie Ross, Halo Infinite has been looking slightly better, with the commonly pointed out features such as new maps, online co-op for campaign, Forge, Infection, as well as miscellaneous improvements here and there, among others. Now for many, this has been a sign that things are back on track, and they'll say that we have a new management to thank for. But I disagree. When a company makes a game, especially when a company makes post-launch support for a live service game, it's not something they just come up with overnight on the fly. Everything we're seeing now is just 343 playing catch-up. Features that were supposed to be there months ago are now just arriving. Ultimately, none of what we're seeing now from Forge, to Infection, to the Customs browser, is a result of the new management. It's all just stuff that was meant to come out months ago that's finally making its way to release. It's just a matter of time. The new management has little to do with it, for better or worse. As for the new management, from an in-house perspective, it's even worse than the old if Glassdoor reviews are to be believed. And that's the thing. If you scour YouTube, or just the internet in general, you can find countless videos and articles from content creators both big and small, with little bits of information from various sources claiming that the work culture at 343 is extremely greedy and hostile to this day, with many employees straight up warning other prospective job seekers to find any source of employment other than 343. One thing I've learned from my own experience is that management makes a big difference, but so do mid and lower level employees. We can sit here and blame Bonnie Ross and Frank O'Connor all we want, and rightfully so, but even if you have the best, most qualified management, which we clearly didn't at 343, but even if we did, if the employees show up with no work ethic, a confrontational attitude, and an I know better than you mentality, then whatever project you're working on is going to fall apart rather quickly. I've pointed this out before, but regardless of how you feel, when you have posts from 343 employees like this going up, and no one immediately gets fired, that's an indication of a serious problem within the company's culture. The way they view themselves, but also us as customers. It really shows this egotistical power trip 343 employees are on when they constantly treat us like petulant children and themselves like the smart, rational, mature adults in the room. Something kind of ironic is that you also see this type of attitude displayed from the 343 Defense Force. Just check any of my comment sections for examples. It's one thing to just civilly disagree with someone, but name-calling and portraying a false sense of superiority is not only wrong, but absolutely pathetic. Then it's these same people that insist that you're the toxic one just for calling 343 out on their shit. But that's another video for another day. Now you could make the argument that people like Jeff Easterling or Unishek, the ones responsible for those laser-brained posts, are just bad apples. But the fact of the matter is that when you have employees acting like this openly, that says something not only about them as individuals, but also about their management, be it junior, senior, or middle. And it makes you wonder what they say behind closed doors. Both of these individuals are still at 343, by the way. In fact, a lot of the key people who screwed up majorly in the past still hold positions at the studio. Most of them that got fired were from the art team, individuals that, whether you liked their work or not, had little to nothing to do with the actual game itself, aside from the visuals. Then there's the other weird thing. Everyone's seemingly praising the new head of 343, Pierre Hintze, despite the fact that thus far I've seen no concrete evidence that Pierre did anything good for the Halo franchise outside of his most basic duties. Many people point to him as the one who quote-unquote saved MCC, but I once again disagree. It's well documented that Pierre had a significant role in directing the massive amount of bug fixes for the game, but once again, it just seems like 343 is playing a game of catch-up. I'm not saying he's doing a bad job, but at the same time, I don't think he's done exceedingly well either. The performance, as far as I'm concerned, is just adequate. He's just doing his job. While MCC is unarguably in a better state than it was 2, 4, or even 8 years ago, it's still not fixed 100%. The fact of the matter is, just a few weeks ago, me and a couple of friends were playing a game night, and we encountered multiple glitches with players being put on the wrong team or not being put on a team at all. I wish I was making this up. This was all in one play session that ultimately wasn't even that long. Then there are the countless crashing issues, achievements that people took hours to grind for not unlocking, as well as random miscellaneous bugs sprinkled throughout. Then you have the hit detection issues. Some people say they don't experience them, but I and many others still do. While it's not nearly as bad as it was years ago, it still isn't where it should be 8 years later. This isn't even getting into things like the skill-based matchmaking being broken and exceptionally brutal towards lone players, the impossibility to play Halo Reach Invasion mode in matchmaking, or the quitting epidemic that, by the way, in my eyes, the solution to isn't more banning. And then there's still the more egregious fact that under Pierre's direction, microtransactions were going to be implemented into MCC. I say going to be and not were considered because a thing many don't understand about 343 is that they're a company, a business. They're not your friend, they're not your parents. They have a goal to achieve first and foremost, and that is to extract as much money as possible from the consumer. When setting out to achieve this goal, companies do something called a risk-benefit analysis. This is to say, what is the potential fallout of an action versus the potential gains? An example of this in your day-to-day life might be, if I eat ice cream, I won't crave it anymore, but then I might gain weight and I won't have any more for another day. For each person, the various other factors that figure into this equation could be different depending on each individual goal, but for 343, the only goal is, and always has been, to make money. So with them, there are little to no other factors in their analysis, it just comes down to what's the most profitable. Not what keeps players happy, not what players enjoy, just money. We saw this with Halo 4 attempting to appeal to a broader audience. We saw it with Halo 5's rec packs, and now we're seeing it with Halo Infinite, despite the massive amount of backlash to the microtransactions and monetized colors. 343 implemented them anyway. This is because they calculated the benefit to be greater than the risk. Now, various unconfirmed sources are saying that they were wrong, and that's why Microsoft fired so many people at the top. Add that to the hostile culture, and you have a recipe for disaster. But there's still one more thing, something I'm going to get a lot of heat for, especially from the 343 Defense Force. For the last several years, we've seen that Microsoft has some interesting hiring practices, often employing people based on arbitrary characteristics, all for the sake of checking off a box to appeal to certain organizations and individuals. I can't say too much on that for fear of being demonetized, but the point is that people aren't being hired at 343 for their talent or passion for the franchise, they're being hired based off of how they look. Literally. In a somewhat recent interview, Pierre Hintze himself said that it is, and I quote, his personal crusade to have more people that look like him work in the industry. I pointed this out in my last video, but felt the need to delve into it a little further today. When we look at 343's history, we can see that Bonnie Ross was clearly hired and featured within the company's spotlight simply because she was pushing for more women in STEM fields, as well as wanted to tackle the depiction of women in video games. This was unarguably one of her core focuses with Halo. We even saw the effects of this. Look at the appearance of Cortana post-Halo 4. Look how it changed to be significantly more conservative. Look at the overabundance of quote-unquote strong female characters shoehorned into the games, be it Palmer, literally half of Fireteam Osiris, and then in the expanded universe, we have a lot of books focused around strong female leads that are ultimately extremely cookie-cutter and uninteresting, mainly because a lot of them seem to have been put there just for the sake of having a female lead. They largely have no depth or character development. Regardless of the effect this kind of hiring has on the art or story direction, I think the far bigger problem is that the fact that people aren't being hired entirely based off of merit, and that's a huge deal. If I'm working on a car all day in the hot sun, I want the impact wrench that works the best. I won't be looking for one that's blue just because I want more blue-colored tools in my garage. I want the one that gets the job done the most efficiently. When you put on more filters and requirements that ultimately have no benefit just for the sake of it, your project will start to fall apart, and this is the result that we're seeing at 343. Now, I'm not saying wokeness and forced diversity ruins Halo all by itself. That would be dishonest and crazy. But what I am saying is that it seems to be a contributing factor. Like I said in my last video, when your studio is on the brink of collapse, your game a disaster, and your financial earnings not meeting expectations, the new person in charge calling diversity his personal crusade and the biggest thing he wants to see in gaming, that doesn't exactly look like someone who's very task-oriented in getting Halo back on track, which is what the franchise needs most right now. This, along with everything else I mentioned, from the very public negative attitude of 343 employees, as well as the general lack of care and respect regarding the IP they inherited, I don't think 343 is willing or able to fix things even after the restructuring. Now, I'm not saying I expect them to bring things back to the level they were at during Halo 3. I don't know why there's this big misconception that people who hold views similar to mine are demanding that. When we bring up what Halo was and compare it to what it is now, we aren't saying we need to go back to 2007. We're simply stating the obvious, and that is from where Halo is now, it's obvious that 343 hasn't done a very good job. Look, Halo has always had its problems even during the Bungie days. Those of you who've watched me for a while will know that I acknowledge this. In fact, I made an over 2-hour-long video about a year ago that I spent a good chunk of explaining the early downfall of Halo under Bungie, and explored the reasons why it happened, ranging from Bungie shooting themselves in the foot, to Microsoft's greed, to other industry giants like Call of Duty taking over. All of this considered, though, doesn't discount from the fact that 343 as a company and as individual employees have regularly displayed a complete lack of understanding and respect for what Halo is, or even attempt to understand it for more than 5 minutes. These people are mostly just business-oriented individuals. It's not about making a cool game with them, and it never has been. Halo has changed, and under 343, as far as I'm concerned, irreversibly for the worst. At the end of the day, I don't care how many new maps Infinite gets. I don't care if they add Firefight. I don't care about Infection or whatever. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it's far too little, far too late, and it's a spit in the face that they continue to shove microtransactions that replaced Halo's staple customization system down our throats every time we try to play the game. For that reason with Infinite, I'm out. All this is why the management shakeup changes nothing. It's all basically the same as it was, and this isn't a doom or take, this is just using basic facts and logic to predict a likely outcome. The facts are that a lot of the people that made Halo where it is today in a worse way are still there. Microsoft and 343 are still hiring people for arbitrary reasons rather than merit. And I genuinely think that there really is no hope for this franchise despite the management change. I hope I'm wrong on all of this, and I hope that someone just proves me out to be an angry person on the internet in the next couple of years. But given what I see laid out in front of me, I don't see it any other way. But that's going to be it for me. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it and tell me what you think. I am Broken Circle, have a great day, and stay safe. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
Actually, 343 saved Halo. You're just a hater. L-take, bro. Get schooled, get a job, and stop taking like a child and building people online, you incel.
And needless to say, I don't give a flying fuck.